Thanks for tuning in at Brackies. Hello everyone and welcome to the first video in this how to make a 2D platformer course. So in this video we're just gonna set up the basic character controller with a camera movement script. We're not gonna actually be coding today. We might look at some code and maybe edit it a bit, but we're just gonna be using some really awesome assets to get this working. Of course, later we're going to be programming, we're going to be designing, and we're going to be doing a lot ourselves. But when it comes to character controllers, it's just a good idea to get a working one in there just when starting out. Awesome. So this series, we're going to code in C#. And basically, it's going to be for novice to intermediate users. And then we will cover maybe some more advanced things later in the series. But if this is your first ever experience with Unity, I recommend you go ahead and watch maybe the Make a Game course or the Going 2D course here. And this is all available at brackies.com. If you simply just scroll down scroll down, you can see that I've changed a lot of things on the website to make it much more pretty and more functional, so everything should be available there. Awesome, so let's just get started with today's video. So as always, I've opened up Unity, and what I've done is I've created a new project, and I've called this one 2D Platformer Tutorial. I haven't imported any of the packages, and I've set up the defaults for 2D. In here, I haven't done anything yet, but what you might want to do is in the scene view, switch over to 2D. Great, so now we see everything in a two-dimensional space with X and Y. Awesome. So what we will do now is we'll download the new sample assets from Unity. So before, if you right click on the project pane and hit import package, you can see that we have all kinds of standard assets that we can import that Unity has pre-made for us, so we don't have to do it ourselves. But these are pretty outdated. So what Unity has done is they've made a new updated and much better version of the sample assets. And these are currently in beta. By the time you watch this video, they might already be in here somewhere, but right now they're only available on the asset store. So let's go to our browser and let's type in assetstore.unity3d.com. You can of course also find it on Google. And then we're going to search for sample assets. Or you can also search for standard assets. The reason why we're doing this in the browser, it's the first one here, is because it's really slow in Unity, which should get better in Unity 5, which should come this summer, or at least I hope so. Great, and now when we found it here, let's click Open in Unity, hit Run Program, and it will open up in the asset store inside of Unity. It will just take a second to load here. As you can see, it is pretty slow. But there's a lot of cool assets. Great, so once it's loaded up, let's simply hit import. You might need to download it first, but then just hit download, wait for it to download and then hit import. It will decompress the package and now it will show us all of the what the package contains. It has a bunch of things in it. As you can see, there's a whole lot of different assets in here. So let's just go ahead and select none. And then just check the sampled assets 2D folder. And it will automatically include all of its subfolders and items. And this is just all we're going to import for now. So let's hit import. And it will start importing these assets correctly. This might take a little while depending on how fast your computer is, if you already have some of it imported and all that. While it's importing, we can just close down our browser here so we don't have it running. And now we can see it's done. Let's close down the asset store and we are ready to start importing we are ready to start using some of these assets in our scene. So let's double click on the sample assets folder, which should now have appeared in your project pane. Let's go into 2D, and now we can see a bunch of different folders containing cool assets. Let's now go under prefabs, and the most valuable asset, the 2D character controller, should be here. Now we can just go ahead and let's actually rename this to player. This is just personal preference, it's up to you. And let's drag this into our hierarchy. So now it should be in our scene, we can see it here. And let's just position it right above the x-axis here and about with a 0 on the x here. So let's just do 0. Let's do just this is fine, 1.6 and then with z at 0. Awesome. Let's walk through what this character controller actually does. So it has a bunch of different components. First off, it's layer. We want to set this to a custom layer. I've already added a layer called player. If you don't have it, simply hit add layer. And down here on the user layer 8, you can simply type in what you want. Then again, select the player and select it from the drop-down list. Say yes to children, so it will change all of its children also. Awesome, then it has the transform, which is position, rotation, and scale. The sprite renderer, which will handle actually showing our graphics. And the sprite renderer has what is called a sorting layer. And this is basically just if this is going to be on top or underneath other layers. So we can use this to sort our graphics. And simply what we want to do here is we're going to go in here. And as you can see, I've already added some of these layers just to show you what that you can rearrange them like this. And these layers are arranged according to rendering order. And that means that whatever is on top will be rendered behind, because it will render it pretty much like a painting, that it first paints the background, then the player, and then the foreground on top. So we're just going to do background, player, and then foreground. Now in our player, we can simply select the player layer, and then there's also an order in layer if you have multiple players, but we're just going to leave that at 0. Then right now we have a bunch of animations for this, but I don't really like the way they look. Actually, let's go ahead and play this to see what this looks like right now. And in order for us to play this, we need something for our character to stand on. So let's find a ground. Let's go into 2D, sprites, and then use this prototype type blue one. This is pretty cool. And let's simply just set the X to 0 and then drag down the Y. So it's almost resting. Let's do -10 there. And so we can stand on this. But in order for us to actually collide with it, we need to add a physics component. So go to add component, physics 2D, and then box collider 2D. So now our player can actually interact with this in physics space. Let's rename this to ground. Awesome. So now when we hit play, our character will fall to the ground and we can move from left to right. Let's just disable these gizmos here. So go up here and hit gizmos and it will disable them. So you can move from left to right and you can jump using space. But you will notice that right now we can jump infinitely. I just jumped a bunch of times. And this is not really something we want. So in order for us to fix this, we are gonna just tweak some variables on the player. So now select the player object. Let's disable the animator, which handles all of the animation. It stores the animator controller, which shows how animations are tied together. If you want to see this, you can just double click it and you can see all of the different animations here and how they are connected. That's something we're gonna go into later. Again, this is just a quick overview. One thing I do want to notice, to say before we move on, is that all of this is just placeholder art. We are gonna do a bunch of custom stuff, and I'm probably also gonna do some designs that you can use. But the reason why we are currently using placeholder is first of all to just get our game set up, but also I wanted you to have the opportunity to choose what you want to see in this course. So if you have a good idea, something you want me to see me explain or create, please write it in the comments. The details of this game is not planned out. All I know so far is that it's going to be a 2D platformer. I would love to do some shooting, but let me know if you want puzzle mechanics or a certain art style, maybe 8-bit, maybe just normal sprites. What kinds of animations do you want to see? Do you want to see special physics stuff? All of that, please write suggestions in the comments so I know where to go from. It's depending on you. Cool. So let's move on with our player here, select him. And then in the circle collider, we're just going to leave this. As you can see, he consists of both a box collider and a circle collider to get the right collision. Then he has a rigid body 2D component. And this is because there are basically two ways to make character controllers in Unity. The first one is to use a rigid body component, which Unity has done here. And the good thing about this is that it will easily interact with other game objects. So it has good physics interaction in terms that you can push boxes around and interact with other rigid bodies. It doesn't give you quite as much control over how the character behaves, but I really like this type of movement. The other is to code all of the movement from ground up, simply using arrays where you cast lines to see if he's standing on the ground. You calculate all movement yourself, not just by adding forces and such. So that's the second way, and it's a bit more complicated and not really something we're going to need so far. Awesome, so you can of course tweak the rigid body for your liking. And now we get to the really cool stuff. Now we get to the platformer character 2D movement script. And this is where we can change stuff like his speed, his jump force, his crouching speed, whether or not he can be controlled in air. I really like when 2D characters can be controlled in air. I know it's not realistic, but I think that not being able to control in air can be really annoying, especially when a lot of jumping is involved. So I would leave that if I was you, but again, it's up to you. And also, this is where we are going to tweak, where we're going to fix the bug where he can currently infinitely jump. The problem is that we have this drop down here called what is ground. And this is basically a set of layers that you can include or exclude whenever the player checks if he's standing on the ground. So right now you can see we've made a layer for our player called player, and that is also on the list. And this is the essence of the problem, because our player is not at ground, but right now the script thinks he is. So whenever he's just floating in air, he's colliding with himself, so that the script constantly thinks that, well, we're standing on the ground, we can jump again. This is an issue because we're actually just colliding with ourselves. So let's just drop down this menu and let's disable the player in what is ground. Now when we hit play, we should be able to only jump once he's hit the ground, and as you can see, it works. Then we have the platformer 2D user control script. This is where all of the input is handled. Because the cool thing about this controller is that Unity have split them up into two scripts. One for the actual movement and physics calculation, and one for the actual input. So that we can easily tweak how we want him to be controlled and how he behaves. That's really awesome. It makes the scripts easier to read and all of that. For now, I'm gonna leave the crouching in here, though I'm not really sure it's something I want for the final game. Then at last we have the Box Collider 2D, which I also showed you before. Great, now that we've tweaked the sky, let's hit apply. And all of the settings will apply to our prefab, and he's working just the way we want him to. Now we can go ahead and add a main camera that will actually follow our player. So let's select the main camera. Let's rename this by deleting the space. It's generally good practice to not have spaces in your naming. I don't know why Unity names main camera with the space by default, but I like to delete that. And of course, also remember that Unity is cap sensitive, so you need a good system for when you need when you want to do capital letters and when you don't. For game objects, I normally do each word with a capital letter, but for many variables, depending on the type, I begin the first word without a capital letter. Again, this is completely up to you. Just make sure you create a system and stick to it. Awesome. So there are two ways of doing this. First off, we can simply drag the main camera under the player. So now it's parented to the player and it will follow him wherever we go. This solution works, but it's not exactly great. The reason why is we don't have much control over the camera, we can't unparent it or make any cool effects with it, and it's not really a smooth position. Also, when we would want to maybe delete the player if he died, our main camera would disappear too. So those are all problems that can be easily solved by having a script simply setting the position of the camera to the position of the player. And in here, we can also do a bunch of smoothing and smart camera work in order for it to work better. So what we want to do now is simply we want to go on the 2D, then scripts, and we want to find the camera 2D follow script. Let's select the main camera and drag it onto there. Awesome. Now let's set the target to player. So drag the player onto target, and let's see if this works. Our main camera now follows our player perfectly. It looks much better, but I think it's just a bit too smooth for my liking. Also, if you notice, right now when we play the game, the camera slowly fades up. So let's just make sure that the camera and the player are at the same Y position. So let's just set the player to 1.5, then copy this position and paste it under the camera's Y position. Awesome, so now when we play it, will already be at the exact position of the player. Of course, he drops down a little bit, but that we're just gonna ignore. Awesome, so under the camera 2D follow script, you can see we have a bunch of settings. The first one is dampening, which is basically how smooth the movements of the camera is gonna be. And I think that right now it's way too smooth, because I would really like this game to be quite fast-paced, and then it quickly gets annoying if your camera doesn't follow and if it's constantly moving and all that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do something like 0.3. The look ahead factor is pretty cool. So right now, if we let's say walk a bit to the left, you will notice that our camera doesn't focus on our player right away. It looks 3 units ahead, and this works for both directions, and it helps us look forward to see what is coming up ahead. So it's great to give the player a bit more insight on the direction he's walking, but I think it's just a bit too much as is. So let's bump this up to 1.5. Then of course we have the return speed and the move threshold, which you can adjust to make the blending back a little better. So right now we look and then it slowly fades back into our player's position. You can adjust those values to make that transition better if you don't like it. I think it's pretty good as is. So now that was pretty much the basics of this tutorial. I'm glad with what we've gotten done here. We've set up a basic scene with a character that moves and a main camera that follows him. Again, I can't stress this enough. Please leave some comments on what you would like to see. I'm very open to feedback, and I'm looking very much forward to seeing how this game will shape up. Cool. So thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.